this week I'm kind of deviating a little bit from the lectionary text, and God was kind of speaking to me, and I was wrestling with things, and it was after the bulletin information got turned into Barbara, so that's why the Job reading isn't on there. But I wanted to just talk a little about Job, because I think in Job we see something that opens up our view with the things we struggle with ourselves. If you're not familiar with what happens in Job, you might look at the reading, listen to the reading I read this morning, and not realize just how harsh it all comes across. In the midst of his mourning and his grieving, God comes in, and let's put this into context. It's the 38th chapter of Job. For 38 chapters, Job has been pleading. Job has been lamenting. Job has been grieving. And God is silent and does not come to him for 38 chapters. And then when God finally shows up on the scene, God kind of puts him in his place. God is a bit rough with him. I'm not sure if any of you have had to comfort a grieving friend or loved one, but the way God comes in is not the way most of us would do it. It almost, when you're reading, it almost makes you want to say, God, I think your bedside manner needs a little work. And when we look back at the earlier chapters of Job, the responses of Job's friends can seem rather sensible in comparison. Eliphaz leads in slowly and says, "Think now, who that was innocent ever perished? Or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed." And that's Job chapter 4, verses 7 to 9. Eliphaz appeals to an understanding of God's justice, that God sustains the righteous and punishes the wicked. In other words, we reap what we sow. You get what's coming to you. According to this logic, the root of human suffering is human sinfulness. As he says in chapter 5, "For misery does not come from the earth, nor does trouble sprout from the ground, but human beings are born to trouble, just as sparks fly upward." So we reap what we sow. And just to remember, he's saying this to a man who first, a man of good station in life, of holy and righteous man, who God himself describes as upright, who first loses his livestock and his servants, then loses his fields, and in a final insult, his house comes crumbling down when his children are in it. And this is Eliphaz's answer: well, we reap what we sow. And his implication is, then you must have done something wrong. Or maybe your family. And then another friend comes, Bildad chimes in. Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children sinned against him, he delivered them into the power of their transgression. Like Eliphaz, Bildad is adamant that Job's sinfulness and the sinfulness of his children is the cause of their suffering. So in his mind, Job only needs to seek God and make supplication to the Almighty, and if God finds him pure and upright, he will be restored. In Bildad's and Eliphaz's arguments, we hear faint echoes of the prophets. Repent, and then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Your ancient ruins will be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. And Bildad and Eliphaz would have been right if only they weren't so wrong. They're carefully explained theologies of suffering, how they see suffering in the world. For them, it's a clear-cut and simple formula. You do good things and good things happen to you. You do bad things and then bad things happen to you. It's quite simple for them. So Job got into the situation because somehow he sinned against God, and his way out is to repent and do good things. But they're wrong, because in the beginning we are told that Job's suffering is not a punishment from God or a trial. We're told, in fact, by God that Job is blameless and upright, who fears God and turns away from evil. But instead, what we know, but his friends do not, is that Job's suffering is a result of Satan, who has been allowed to touch his possessions and ultimately touch his body. Without this crucial knowledge, Bildad's and Eliphaz's explanations fall short. And so in the end, they would be right if they were only not wrong. In attempting to explain what is happening, I think like many of us in these situations, we wonder, why is this happening? In trying to explain it, Job's friends attempt to bring order and understanding to a chaotic situation. I mean, to go back, I don't want to be too harsh on them, but when they first see their friend, they are reduced to tears. They wail and tear their robes. And then, for 7 days, they sit with him in silence, grieving his loss and mourning his suffering. And so while, in the end of the day, their explanations fall short, it is not because they are without heart. For 7 days, they sit with him. The explanations represent a sincere attempt to make sense of the seeming senselessness of suffering. And the reality is, Job's suffering threatens the clarity with which they see their lives and see God. I think for the most part, we are people who dislike complication. We like life to be simple, to be clear-cut. At its core, Job's struggle is one to make sense of how human beings can live with such little control over our lives, where we are unable to prevent or even avoid suffering. Without a clear-cut formula of what brings about bad things, how can we go on? It seems so senseless. It seems so random. And the struggle is that there's simply no roadmap for a peaceful life, free and untouched by suffering and the difficult times and places of life. Yet greater than our ability, our inability to control and prevent suffering is our inability to control God's blessing and the outpouring of God's love. Put simply, we would be damned if blessing was dependent upon our understanding of the mystery of God's love. If God's goodness was dependent upon our actions. So for Job's friends and Job himself, he struggles because it seems like there is no formula to prevent bad things. It can't be, you do X, Y, and Z, and then bad things won't happen. But the flip side of that is also, there is no formula by which the blessings of God, that God's love comes to us. And so while there is a mystery of suffering, a mystery of why things happen, the senselessness of it all, on the other hand, is also the awesome senselessness of God's love, the awesome senselessness and mystery of the good and joyous things of life. Through his speech, God reminds Job of the wonderful mystery that is God's love. He asks them all these things.